In the studio with us this evening is Delegate Kevin Hornberger. Kevin represents District 35A here in Cecil County. Kevin, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Allison. Really appreciate it.
So, the 2018 legislative session ended back in April.
It did.
What were the highs and lows for Cecil County this year?
Well, we actually had a number of local bills that we got passed, as we have in past years. One of which expands the collective bargaining agreement for the sheriff's office, so it adds a few key staff into the CBA. And the other one was really helped out the citizens. We actually are one of the last counties that has mandatory training, tips training for bartenders and people that serve alcohol. So this will increase the number of folks that need to be trained, and it'll make the restaurants and our streets safer because it'll give the staff the ability to cite someone when they're had too much to drink.
Right.
Yep. So we got both of those passed. Those are sort of the local bills. And then we had a number of larger bills, statewide initiatives that we worked very hard on, probably the biggest of which was a tax cut for military personnel. So we've actually been working on that for the last 4 years. So to be able to push it over the top this year, I think is going to have a real positive impact because a lot of our veterans were leaving because they couldn't afford the taxes. So that's also very exciting. So there have been so many developments in the past few years toward economic growth for Cecil County, especially with the arrival of employers like Amazon and Lidl. That's correct, yep.
As a delegate, what can you do to attract higher paying jobs to support middle class families?
Sure, we have to diversify our employment streams here. And I tell you, any job is better than no job at all. I'm very happy to see the Amazon warehouse, True Air, etc. These are all very important jobs, and we've had one of the largest job growths in the state over the last 4 years. Now, as far as diversifying, get those higher income jobs, I was actually lucky enough last night to attend the Orbital ATK launch down at Wallops Island.
Oh, cool.
So as many of the viewers know, we actually have an Orbital ATK here in Cecil County. And one of the things that a gentleman from the administration brought forward is that the space race is back on. We're going to be going back to the moon, and we're also going to be going to Mars, hopefully within the next 4 years. So that means great expansions for places like ATK, and hopefully that means expansion of high-tech jobs.
Right.
So by doing those sort of partnerships, we also have Aberdeen Proving Ground, which is in close proximity, and we're working with University of Maryland and University of Delaware to start an incubator. So we can have some high-tech students working on different things, getting patents, etc., and that'll help diversify our employment. Very exciting.
Very cool.
Yep.
So you don't have a primary challenger. You're the presumptive nominee for the primary on June 26th.
That's correct.
But you have an opponent in Democrat Jo Beth Bowers. Why should voters re-elect you?
Well, 4 years ago when I ran, I put out a pretty bold sort of platform that we didn't have to have any more tax increases, that we didn't have to have any more fee increases, that we needed to stabilize our spending and get money back to the taxpayer. And this was after we endured 8 years of 40 consecutive tax increases and fee increases, and our state was heading in the wrong direction. Employers were leaving, employers were going out of business. I ran with Governor Larry Hogan, who at the time, just like myself, had never been involved in politics. And people took a chance on us. They really did, because there were so many incumbents, there was just a status quo. The voter wanted something different. And we've been able to deliver in the last 4 years on those promises. And all we're asking the voter is to give us more opportunities to continue to lower those taxes and continue to protect our rights. And that's why I think I'm the best candidate. Experience matters.
How do you think that you can balance those tax cuts with curbing spending in other areas and also increasing revenue in other areas? One
of the biggest observations is that when we ran, of course, we ran on lower taxes, but really what the major problem was is that our spending was out of control. Automatic refunding with increases every year, even though we were going into deficit budget cycles, not pay attention to our debt and paying down our debt. Our debt service has increased greatly during the O'Malley years. By focusing on paying down that debt, we put more money in our pockets and we put more money in agencies as opposed to paying off that debt. We've also got better bond ratings, and we're being a better steward of the taxpayers' money. One perfect example is the pension fund. Our pension fund for many years was underperforming, so we'd have to front load more money into it to make up for those losses. But by switching to an actuarial model now, we're getting better yields for lower cost. So those are just some very small examples on very big ticket items of way that we're doing a better job of spending the taxpayer dollars.
You've mentioned that bringing money back to Cecil County is one of your priorities. Mm-hmm. So how will you go about doing that?
Well, one of the things that we notice is that as far as equity goes, taxpayers' dollars we pay to the state, usually in the form of property tax, that those were being redistributed in central Maryland mm-hmm. and more of the urban areas.
Right.
So one of the things that we worked on over the last 4 years, along with my colleagues in the Cecil delegation, was returning some of that equity back to Cecil. Some of our biggest projects that we've taken on and funded would be the Perry Point Veterans Housing.
Right.
That was $24 million alone. This was a project that languished for almost 10 years previous to myself being elected. And now I'm happy to say that it's fully funded. Mm-hmm. We were also able to leverage donor dollars with folks like Home Depot and Norfolk Grumman that also brought money in. So it doesn't always have to be about taxpayer dollars. Mm-hmm. You also mentioned earlier in your program about the 4-star and 5-star program. Right. Very exciting. I got to work on that since day one. And we've got our first commitment of $1 million from the BPW. Mm-hmm. That's hard money. Now that we have that commitment, you're going to see donors start to show up. They're expecting the total price tag of that to be $20 million. That's a tremendous amount of money.
Right.
But by bringing on those donors, by looking at different things like open space money, that's where that million came from, we can kind of dip into those other pots, bring some of that funding back to Cecil County. So those are 2 big ticket examples where we've been able to be very successful.
Yeah. There's a growing sense of urgency around school safety, mm-hmm. and the shooting at the high school in Texas last week is a tragic reminder of that. This past year, you supported a ban on bump stocks in Maryland.
That's correct.
Do you expect more legislation to be aimed at school safety, and what will be your approach to that?
So as you may know and the viewers at home may know, I'm very pro Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. I actually ran on a platform of that, and we had a few bills passed before I got elected that I thought were a little too restrictive and went too far. In terms of the bump stock, a bump stock is a device for the viewers at home that basically takes a semi-automatic weapon and turns it into a fully automatic weapon.
Right.
As you know, fully automatic weapons are banned. This was sort of a hack, if you will, mm-hmm. to get around that law, and I felt that it was something that should be codified here in the state because the only thing that you would use that for would be to hurt other people.
Right.
As far as the school safety goes, I'm fortunate enough to be on the educational subcommittee. Mm-hmm. And we actually just pushed out this last year, and this was as a result of many school shootings that have happened over the last decade.
Right.
The school safety bill, which allowed an additional $10 million to build out and retrofit existing schools so mm-hmm. that they have that security vestibule. That keeps folks from coming in the school and starting to shoot. They have that barrier where they can be locked down. Mm-hmm. There was also funding in there to do law enforcement at our schools. Cecil's ahead of the curve when it comes to protecting our students. So we have the sheriff's office that's present in the high schools. There. Yep. Mm-hmm. And then they can also rotate and go to different schools. Not every county is like that. So this bill that was passed, there's some funding in there, and then there's also guidelines that other school districts can share that information and protect our students. So I was very happy to work on that. It was actually the governor's bill. There was a competing bill in the Senate, and we were able to blend the 2 together and come up with a really good solution. So it's a big win for the students.
And do you expect more legislation like that in the coming years?
I do. During session, there was actually a shooting in Leonardtown in southern Maryland. Mm-hmm. Very tragic. And it was between a boyfriend and a girlfriend.
Right.
So these sort of shootings now are happening more often. They're happening for all sorts of reasons. Mm-hmm. But there's really two things that we can do. One is we need to make sure that our law enforcement is properly funded, and 2 is the training not only of the students but of the teachers. And I see that there will be more focus on that in the future. And the number of new schools that we have that are under construction and being built, I think you're going to see a greater emphasis on security going into that new construction, mm-hmm. as well as the retrofit of the existing.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being here.
It was my pleasure. Yep. And I wanted to add one more thing, just because you mentioned that 4-star race.
Oh, yeah.
So we have the steeplechase race coming up this weekend.
Yes.
And I got a little secret for the viewers at home.
Oh, yes, I think I know this.
I was able to get in front of the governor and invite him to the race, mm-hmm. and as far as I know, he'll be there. So I hope everyone can attend. It's going to be a hoot. And we haven't had a governor come in almost 20 years.
That's really exciting.
So make sure you're there. It'll be a lot of fun. All right, thanks.